Situated in the heart of Leicestershire is Kibworth Harcourt. This small parish has had a mill since around 1265, whose ownership first passed to Martyn College, Oxford, and then, in 1936, to the SPAB Society to ensure its preservation. The mill itself is the only remaining post mill in Leicestershire, and as such is historically significant. Although remedial work was carried out in the 1930s and again in 1970, it now requires a major restoration to preserve it for future generations.
My name's John Wallace. I'm the Managing Director for Dorothea Restorations. We as a company restore historic and architectural ironwork, historic machinery and wind and water mills. So mill writing is a large part of what we get involved with. Restoration is a really interesting subject. It's always different, nothing's ever the same, no challenges are ever the same. It'll bring it back to a rotating condition is what we're calling it. So the sails will be able to rotate and the internal machinery will be able to rotate. Whether it's appropriate to put it back into milling condition and produce flour, I think we're going to see how the mill reacts when things start rotating. It's a very old mill, this, so we've got to be a bit careful about doing any further damage to the structure or the fabric in the future. We started stripping off various bits in the weatherboarding and taking off some of the roof sheeting and things like that, and found there's quite a lot of decay in areas that you would expect there to be, so all the areas where the boarding has failed or the water's got in.
So this is what you call a breast beam. We're replacing this just due to the fact the other one was severely rotten. It's quite an important part of the mill. This is actually supporting the wind shaft. It takes the full weight of the sails. We cut it to size back in the workshop. We then craned up and over the scaffold and then manhandled it up into its position. It weighs roughly about 1/4 ton in weight, so as you can imagine it's very, very difficult to lift up and in by hand.
I'm taking cores out of various bits of the wood in an attempt to date them through dendrochronology, tree ring dating. So I've just taken this core. It's crude state, it gets cleaned up, sanded, but you can probably see some traces of rings in here, and those rings represent the different growth rates in different years, so it should be unique to the time the tree grew in. And when I've taken that home, polished it up and measured the rings, hopefully we'll be able to tell when the tree was growing and when it died, because we've got the outside of the tree on there. And they used the trees pretty much straight away, they weren't seasoned. I've done 7 so far, including the lower part of this main post, which is one of the important timbers that they didn't manage to date previously. These are exceptional timbers. Quite often these main posts are the oldest bit of a mill because they get reused time and time again.
The trestle holds up the entire mill, so if there's any rot or wear in that, then there's quite a lot of risk to the mill. We've found that on every cross tree and quarter bar at the end, they are completely rotten. The joints have all completely gone. So it's a bit of a miracle this mill stayed stood upright for as long as it has. So we have devised a way of jacking the mill up. We've done that, and we're now in the process of cutting off all the rot and scarfing in new sections of timber where required. It's a pleasure to work on an old building, particularly one that's been put together in such a good way. There's a lot of craftsmanship here. It's also a challenge. Every time you sort of undo a joint or scarf something else in, there's potential for finding more work, more rot. But just working out how it all interacts with each other is a challenge, but a fun one.